So Linda, what do you think is the difference between a trend and a fad?
That is a great question. A fad to us is something that happens in culture, becomes very, very popular, but has no cultural meaning. It really just becomes something that lives unto itself, is not necessarily connected to anything that came before or necessarily anything that will come after. Whereas a long-term trend is something that sustains over time but evolves and adapts or reacts to whatever came before. So for example, you can have something come into the culture like Uggs boots or Crocs shoes. I don't know why shoes tend to be very faddish, but they're really not a statement of meaning or a reaction to or reflection of what's going on in culture. It's just something that becomes popular. And today what we see as popularity does not necessarily mean cultural success, and certainly not sustainable cultural success. We see that sometimes the things that are most popular or most numerous in our culture aren't necessarily considered the highest quality. And so you have the conundrum now between rating success, which is a numeric measure of popularity, versus quality perception in culture. So a show like NCIS, which is the #1 rated scripted drama, is not in culture held up generally in mainstream culture as the highest quality show, whereas a show like True Detective or Sons of Anarchy or any of those shows that have been widely lauded as cultural successes don't have the numbers of an NCIS, and yet those are the ones that people talk about. So we fundamentally believe, because of our analysis, that cultural success is necessary now in order to gain rating success.
So, so if you were running a network right now,
Right.
what would you think would be the best combination of cultural versus performance?
Right. We advise right now in the current climate that networks really have a diversified strategy in terms of how they measure success. The criteria for success can be ratings driven and culturally driven and brand driven and ad sales driven. Multiple ways to define success. There's no singular metric, just like there's no singular voice of what's true anymore. And so it's really important to understand that sometimes, where it used to be that acquisitions were the sort of ratings drivers and then the originals became the brand builders, now we're seeing people use originals as ratings drivers and also using originals as brand builders. So it's just a shift. It's the same way television has always behaved. It's now that the food chain has elevated, where acquisitions, because you can get them on every platform and through Netflix, they're more like utilities, and the original programming becomes more strategic.
What trends do you see going on right now?
Right now, one of the trends that I'm really very fascinated with personally and professionally is something that has gotten a lot of noise, but I don't see a lot of media companies really addressing explicitly, and that is the changing population of this country. And one of the things that I've been doing a lot of evangelizing on is the shift that's taking place, the paradigm shift that's taking place in the mindset of this country because of really two major forces. One is millennials, and the second is bicultural Hispanics, who tend to be primarily millennials. Those two in combination are creating a perfect storm, which will really enable this paradigm shift that's already way more present than people realize. And I think part of it is because a lot of media companies still tend to look at audiences as segmented in a pie, and we prefer to look at them as an ecosystem that's really interlaced and overlapping between different kinds of people who have the ability to transcend their own, what would have been called slice of the pie, and really influence all of us. So right now what we see is everyone has acknowledged the huge super influence of millennials, but what they have not really embraced is the idea that there are a lot of multi-ethnic, multicultural, and especially with the growth of Hispanics in this country, bicultural people who are part of that and also leading the charge and very often defining what in culture is celebrated. So without really understanding how to embrace them, I don't think media companies can succeed.
So what about a media company who may not be targeting millennials? Are they missing the boat? What do they need to do?
I think media companies need to understand that to win with a total market, they cannot look at audiences as being separate. They are all now interlinked. A lot of the reason is because of social media, that everybody can influence everybody. And the most influential voices on social media happen to be driven by and influenced by millennial thinking. Whether they themselves are millennials, I cannot tell you, but they are embraced by millennials. So what we believe is that to win in a total market strategy, you need to focus on millennials and bicultural Hispanics as the leading edge of that total market, that they are the growth. They are not a niche market. They're not a separate market. So if anyone who is not studying what's going on with millennials and bicultural Hispanics is not studying their growth.